I think it's good for each of us to ask ourselves this question. If the only thing a stranger knew about me was how I went about deciding who to vote for, would that person be able to tell that I'm a Catholic? Hi everybody, Matt Brower with the Montana Catholic Conference. I think most of us would agree that this upcoming election will be very important and probably contentious. The choices we'll be called to make when filling out our ballots may be quite challenging and lack clarity. Our process of discernment may be really messy and difficult. As voters, it's important we recognize that we can be susceptible to dangerous temptations as we go about deciding how we're going to vote. The U.S. bishops have highlighted a couple of these dangerous temptations. The first being that we view issues with a moral equivalence, where no one issue is more important than another. That's not what the Church teaches. For example, our Church teaches that the direct and intentional destruction of innocent human life is always wrong and must always be opposed. St. Pope John Paul II said that the right to life is the most basic and fundamental right and the condition for all other personal rights. I think this imperative is most pronounced when we consider abortion because of the nature and gravity of that issue. Now, the other temptation that the bishops warn us against is this misuse of necessary moral distinctions as a way of ignoring other serious threats to human life and dignity, treating as optional issues that don't involve the direct and intentional killing of another person. That approach can dull our conscience and diminish our commitment to addressing those other, often very serious moral issues. It can also blind us to the interconnectedness of issues. So, for example, abortion and poverty, or criminal justice and public safety issues. The bishops urge us to avoid these temptations. In a previous video, I spoke about intrinsic evil and how drawing distinctions between acts that are intrinsically evil and those that are not can aid us in our discernment when we're deciding how to vote. But I also highlighted the necessity of recognizing that this moral distinction alone is insufficient for our discernment. The gravity of an evil doesn't necessarily correspond to the category. We still need to use a well-formed conscience and exercise prudence. So the question comes up regarding a candidate who favors a policy promoting an intrinsic evil. Again, an intrinsic evil is something we must never do regardless of the circumstances. Acts such as engaging in or promoting racism, abortion, torture, and so on. Clearly, one cannot vote for a candidate who favors a policy that promotes an intrinsic evil if that voter's intent is to support that position. For example, we ought never vote for a candidate because that candidate is pro-choice. We cannot vote intending to support evil. That's what we call formal cooperation. But what about a voter who, in voting for a candidate, doesn't intend to support a candidate's policy position promoting an evil, but votes for that person for other reasons? Is it permissible for a Catholic to still vote for that candidate? Cardinal Ratzinger, who would later become Pope Benedict XVI, helped answer that question back in 2004 in a letter he sent to the U.S. bishops. In that letter, he said that when a Catholic does not share a candidate's stand in favor of abortion and or euthanasia, but votes for that candidate for other reasons, it is considered remote material cooperation, which can be permitted in the presence of proportionate reasons. That then begs the question, what are proportionate reasons? And here it gets trickier because the Church does not provide us with a specific definition of what those are. Instead, the Church leaves it to us to use our well-formed conscience, understanding the Church's moral and social teaching, and exercising prudence to make that decision, to make that judgment. Again, however, that doesn't give us a blank check. To the best of our ability, our judgments still need to be morally sound and grounded in reason and fact. This issue of voting for candidates who favor policies promoting intrinsic evils and whether proportionate reasons exist seems to come up most often surrounding the issue of abortion, and understandably so. A now retired archbishop some years ago addressed this issue and gave an example of what that analysis might look like. He said, "We cannot support pro-choice candidates without a truly proportionate reason for doing so." And when it comes to the issue of abortion, what would such a proportionate reason look like? He wrote, "It's the kind of reason we will be able to explain with a clean heart to the victims of abortion when we meet them in the next life, which we certainly will. If we're confident that these victims will accept our motives, then we can proceed." Now, maybe this example isn't perfect, but I do think it's helpful. The interesting thing about this example is that you can substitute in other victimized, vulnerable populations. So we can talk about standing before the victims of racism, the victims of torture, the forgotten poor, the neglected refugee, in addition to the unborn child. This helps bring into focus what our moral discernment should look like. It lays bare our heart, our motives, and our values, still considering prudently the gravity of goods and evils supported by candidates, and other considerations like a candidate's ability, opportunity, and capacity to influence on given issues. There's another point I'd like to address. There are those who say that if you vote for someone other than one of the prominent candidates, that's a wasted vote. I completely disagree. And it's not because I don't think people should vote for one of the prominent candidates. It's because I think it sells the act of voting short. Voting is a moral act. It involves our conscience. In a sense, it's our conscience speaking into the world. And it's a way we witness, even though it's largely private. It's a way we witness to the truth and to our faith. And the impact of our vote extends well beyond the electoral and policy consequences. The way we discern how we're going to vote impacts us personally, individually. Voting is reflective of who we are, but it's also formative. To some extent, and not perfectly so, but to some extent, as we vote and discern how to do so, so we become. I think it's important that we pause and reflect and ask, what is this process of voting, this discernment? What is it doing to us internally, spiritually? Because however we discern, however we vote, it needs to be done in a way that draws us closer to Jesus Christ and to His church. Thanks again for watching the video today. Again, if you find these videos helpful, please take a moment to share them with your family and friends. I hope you'll join me next time.